Good evening, councillors. Good evening, staff members and our guest, Fabio. Welcome to our March meeting of council. We have Councillor Sharon Lewis will be with us, but might be half an hour or so late. So we have a full complement of councillors tonight, and I thank you so much for your presence. It's important. We'll begin to acknowledge the Ngadjuri people, the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. We have no apologies at this point in time. We have no leave of absence and no non-attendance. The minutes of the previous meeting held in February the 22nd, would someone like to move that way? They'd be received as a true and correct record of that meeting. Thanks, Councillor Dean. Someone like to second that? Councillor Bill, all those in...
Just a question on the minutes of the last meeting.
Certainly.
Are we talking about the general minutes or the confidential minutes?
Both.
Both?
Both.
Well, I've got a question on the minutes. Originally, there were some minutes issued that were wrong. And they were put out there 2 days later, the minutes were changed without any revision or any notification why. I just wonder if somebody could give us an explanation why.
I wasn't aware of that. Thank you, June.
Through the chair, just they needed an amendment because the record of the Colburn
There was the division.
division. There was a name missing from the division that was updated. It was noticed and then included. It was just left off accidentally.
What I'm getting at with those, if you publish minutes, in my experience, if you then publish another set of minutes, you should say that's revision A or what have you, and explain what the mistake or the change was and who was the author of the minutes, which I think we can learn from.
Was there any explanation at all, June?
Through the chair, well, it's probably best if Richard.
Speak loud. Look, I'd like to thank mostly for bringing that matter up, and I must admit that it's a matter that's silent code of practice, and with the lead of the council, I'm happy to include that as a revision in our meeting procedures. Currently, it's not. So, June is quite right. Once we determined after consultation that we made an error in publishing that council vision, appropriate that we needed to issue those revised minutes showing the account. But again, I thank Councillor Moses.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for that, and thanks, Councillor Mosley, for that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor Peter.
in connection with that, I noticed that the matter was moved and it was lost. The division was called. The mover was not recorded and the division was lost. But I think the minutes are incomplete in that there's no record of whoever or the person who called the division, called for the division. So there's another correction.
We'll take that on. Can we amend the minutes to have that person who moved that motion? Was that you, Councillor Canelli? Or would someone like to own up to that? Who moved that motion? Who hasn't been named? What was the motion, Councillor Canelli? Yes. So it was someone within the division that moved the motion. Yes. So surely that person should know if they did or they didn't. That's the most.
Because this was in confidential, shouldn't we be discussing this in confidential later on?
Probably a good idea.
Right.
All right, we'll move on. Right. Minutes of the confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of February 22 in this chamber. Someone like to move that way? They are true and correct. They have been. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Mosley? Did you vote? The motion is carried. Thanks, councillors. Right, we move on to communications. Been a busy month. As a council, we're doing a lot of things, and it's very noticeable when you walk around the communities as well. One matter the other day that came up, and I was particularly pleased that I was invited to attend, was a review of the Barossa character area in the called by the Barossa Council. Craig Doyle and Richard Dodson were in attendance, and they asked me if I would like to come along. I was pleased I went. A big part of the Barossa, of course, is in our council region, as you're aware, and I think we do need to be on top of what's being proposed, when and how. And it was a good session, and I certainly learnt more about the Barossa character area and preservation than I knew. So I was pleased with that invite. The SAROC met twice during this particular period, the South Australian Regional Organisation of Councils. There are 12 members of that of SAROC, and they have a number of matters on their agenda. Of course, that basically they play an advocacy role in most of these things. But one of the things that I think is very important to our council, and probably important across the state and across the nation, is affordable housing. So that's not gone unnoticed, certainly in state government circles and local government circles. It's become a huge issue, housing in regional areas, and I think Councillor Sam brought something up recently at one of our meetings there about rental charges in our specific council area, saying that there was something like 2 properties available under about $400 or over $400, so or under. It's an enormous issue, and it's not going to go away very quickly because there's no real plans in place or no resources in place to do much about it. But it's certainly firmly on the agenda of local government and the SAROC. Plenty of media contact during the month. We got a bit of an article in the latest magazine, the Barossa magazine, which comes out quarterly. This one was called Tattoos and Ties. And it was a pretty well a warts and all sort of synopsis of this little black duck. So I was very apprehensive. I knew this was coming out, and I didn't know whether to run or hide or what to do. But I have read it, and I think Alicia done a reasonably good job on me.
Did you bear him all, Bill?
Well, that was put to me, but I'm too old. But no, that was an interesting aside. Also, the boundary reform is on our agenda tonight, but we've made some statements in relation to boundary reform, and I think they needed to be made. We asked our candidates in light to show their hand. We got no response in relation to that till after the event by one of the candidates. Pretty disappointing, but we did make front page of the leader newspaper. They took what we said seriously, and it was in the editorial as well. And from all the feedback I've had to date, I've not had one person not congratulate us and say, good on you for standing up for the people. Because that's precisely what we're doing. And in some of those things that went out there, you might say, well, they should have come to council first, and possibly that's the case. But sometimes you've just got to lead. And I think the table that showed the difference in the rate of the residents of Hewitt to the rate in Gawler on a $500,000 house, you would have to ask the question, why do we need a commission to talk about boundary reform? It was just a nonsense, the $400 or $500 difference between the rate and the minimum rate, $175 difference for no extra services, in fact, probably less. So it's sort of almost a no-brainer. However, it's going through that process, and it's going to be an expensive process whether we like it or not, because we're going to have to pay our own costs in all of this. And we're going to have to defend our position, which we've had to do for the last 2 years. And already I think we've come under some extreme sort of cost pressures and time pressures for staff and elected members in defending ourselves. And, I just noticed in one of the articles there in the Bunyip, it's got Councillor Karen and Henry down there with a map. Looked like it reminded me of Mr. Putin and having a map of Ukraine. It wasn't a good look, I don't think, and I think Karen might be a bit sorry that they printed that. I think we've got to defend ourselves to the hilt, and I'm quite sure that we will. And I'm absolutely positive we've got a lot of people on our side to support that. All the other matters that come up through SAROC, it'll be coming up at the local government AGM general meeting coming up shortly, is a fair rating for electric windmills for generators. The companies that are putting these generators in place, and we all agree it's the way to go, and it's fine, but they're not paying any rates, and everyone else in our community does. So there's a major push to have a good look at some of these companies and what their, what rate revenue they're not paying, and it's quite substantial. In fact, it's huge. When you consider many of them are multinational companies that are billion-dollar companies, they're not million-dollar companies. They've got a lot of money, and I think they can afford to pay their way. So that's high on the agenda of local government now as well, to start pushing the pedal down. Also, the regional workforce for the medical profession. Something again that our doctors here, Dr. Lecons and Max, approached me about it, and I took it to our Legatus group, and Simon Milcox took it further from there. We've got a very comprehensive report on what's been going on in relation to attracting doctors to the regional areas and keeping them here as well. And that report's quite in depth, and I'll be passing that on to Dr. Lecons and Max for them to have a look at. At least they are aware that we've followed up on their behalf, and hopefully some good will come from it. But it's a serious matter. It's not just affecting our region here, of course. It's affecting regions across Australia, or across South Australia, pardon me. That's about all I need to tell you about councillors. Unless you've got any questions of me, I'll ask if any other councillors may like to report on any matters that they're involved with. Even the jiu-jitsu might be good. Oh, come on, Mark. Councillor Mark.
Very briefly, I competed in my first jiu-jitsu competition on Sunday. Came home with a black eye, a lot of soreness, and a bronze medal. So it was worth it. I had a ball. I'm super competitive, so I had a great time. And I made the mistake of putting some photos up on Facebook, which the mayor has seen, which is why he's called me out today. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Councillor Mark. Well done. Anything further, councillors? If not, we'll move on. There's been a slight change in the format of the minutes from the previous meetings, business arising. It's not quite complete at this point, as I understand, and it may go back to the portrait style. What I've suggested we do, councillors, and correct me if you think this is not going to work, but rather than go through every date, which can be a bit tedious, we'll look at the page number And if there are any matters on that page you'd like to discuss, we can pull that out and talk about that rather than each individual date. Is that reasonable and fair? Councillor Bill?
Yeah, just a question before we start there. I noticed the changes, every item has got target date changed.
Yes.
Can we get an explanation of what that means?
Yep. Well, that was a question we asked just an hour or so ago. That is a little bit misleading. That target date will be changed to updated. When it was updated last. Perhaps I'll pass over to Jen.
It's fine. 2-second response really. Mayor Bill's correct, and it's what the program Info Council, the new program we're using to facilitate our production of agendas of minutes is called. It calls it the target date, but we can work with the developer behind the scenes to get that amended to make it a bit clearer. It's just the name that they've included in the system at present, but we'll try and get it changed. Carrie is the one who's doing all the work.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Carrie. Councillor Bill?
Yeah, I mean, the target date says updated, target date changed on the 14th of March. Does that mean it was updated, or does that mean every item has been looked at on the 14th of March, or what's that? Yeah. Been updated, yeah.
Yes, Peter.
Just incidentally, I noticed that there's not a monthly financial report in the agenda.
That's correct.
Through the chair again. That's obviously correct, and our new finance manager, Nigel Graves, is working on a new report that will be more accurate, because quite often there's discrepancies in the spend to date or overspend, and the response has been that's due to timing. So the new budget will have actual monthly forecasts against the spend, so that should eliminate some of that problem. So we're just taking care of a new that, and that hasn't been.
Is there any, to your knowledge, anything that we needed to know about that we don't know because of that?
Through the chair, no, not at the moment, but there will be a budget review coming out shortly, and that will have any anomalies, overspends and underspends, and will be reported that way.
So there was nothing outstanding in this particular period. Any further questions, councillors?
I just, so I think saying updated makes it clearer, really, than date changed, the target date changed. I think if you use the word updated on by so and so on the 14th of March, is a lot clearer, and I think that's the way we should go.
Yeah, thank you. I think Carrie's right onto that. Okay, that's page 5, councillors. Councillor David.
Just to add a little bit onto the end of that, when we do have that target date and it changes, there will be a reason why it's changed, an explanation. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So page 5, councillors, is there any matters on page 5 that you'd like to have any further understanding of? Page 6. Page 7. And page 8. All completed. This will take a little bit of getting used to, councillors, but I do seriously believe we're on the right track. It frightens me, change, but you know, we must do that. We must try and make it easier for ourselves in the future. But when the transition, in part of the transition period, is always a bit awkward, and I think that's where we are at the present. We're back to now item 9 on our agenda, recommendations from the committees. First one is the Infrastructure Committee meeting, that the agenda, reports and minutes of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Infrastructure Committee meeting held Wednesday the 2nd of March 2022 be received. Would someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor Lynn and Councillor Peter. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Councillor Cannell is chair of that meeting. Is there anything you'd like to add, Councillor?
Well, in general, I think it was a good meeting.
Yep.
And number 4, 10-year plant and fleet replacement program. I think that was very good, because we need to be as economical as we can.
Yep.
If we can, we don't know if we should use the term string it out, but the other factors being equal, we can get another year out of a piece of plant and equipment. Well, for the good.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Cannell. I thought it was a very good meeting also. Are there any, Councillor?
Yeah, just one comment. From my reading, we don't get the minutes in the agenda of this meeting. We used to get the minutes of this meeting put in, and so we've now got to go to the minutes through the website. I'd much prefer. I'm too lazy to do that, so I'd much prefer to have, particularly with a capital program, I'd like to have a look through that sort of stuff. So if we could get those minutes put back into the agenda, that'd be great.
Thanks, Councillor. That's a very good point. Excellent. Councillor Knapp?
Yes, I just wanted to tell people that the Nurse Road is complete now after all these years, and everybody's just clapping their hands like you can't imagine. It's just lovely. They haven't done the aprons yet onto the side roads, but that'll be done. And I think it was the 2 spray seal, was it? Yes, yeah. And everybody's just wrapped.
That's great news. Well done to the infrastructure team. Councillor Simon?
If I may, just that question about item number 4. In that 10-year plant and fleet replacement program, I don't see any mention or whatever for any electric fleet, which I think within 10 years we should definitely be thinking about this. I mean, we should be thinking about it earlier, but just wondering if there's something that we need to work in there specifically, like if we're going to endorse the sustainability and action plan tonight, which it says in there we should be thinking about electric fleets. I'm just wondering how that fits together.
Without the minutes in there, that's a bit hard to go back to, without the minutes of the meeting. Can I pass over to?
I'm happy to respond to that through the chair. The 10-year plan really focuses on the dollar allocation rather than the actual vehicle. So as the vehicles become appropriate for the fleet based on, and I say that roughly based on the sort of category of vehicle that's on, I think from memory, the left-hand side, which might have said, you know, 4-wheel drive dual cab ute or something like that. So as those electric vehicles come in, they will then be, you know, transitioned into the fleet. But I think, as you can see from the fleet, there's not a lot of what I would call general just commuter vehicles. Most of it is very purpose for a particular role or function of that job. But as they come on board, we would expect that will just convert over.
Further questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the reports and recommendations of the meeting of the Light Regional Council. Oh, sorry, Councillor. Oh, numbered 1 to 4, this will be adopted. Thank you, Councillor Sam. Someone like to second that? Councillor Dean. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. We move on now to our strategy committee, and this was an interesting meeting, but not terribly well attended, but it was an interesting meeting and good outcomes, and that was the main thing. Recommendation at the top of the page there is that the minutes of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Strategy Committee held on Wednesday, the 9th of March, be received. Would someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor David. Someone like to second that? Councillor Bill. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Councillor Bill, would you like, as chair of that, would you like to make any comment?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we had a good discussion on this. It's only one item, but it was quite a, we were there for almost an hour on this thing. It follows up on the workshop that we had earlier in the year. And it basically looked at making it more accessible and more advantageous for people to seek grants. And you'll see that we've proposed that the funding be doubled basically on most of the items.
Thank you, Councillor Bill. I thought it was a very good meeting also. Would someone like to move that? Oh, pardon me. The second recommendation, if there was no further questions, is that the reports and recommendation of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Strategy Committee held Wednesday, 9th of March, numbered 1, listed below, be adopted. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Bill and Councillor David. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Moving on now for reports for information. The first one being the reports, the boundary reform of Gawler Stage 2 proposal. I'm not sure if Brian, you might like to make a comment in relation to where we're up to with this, or the implications to our council that could be forthcoming.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, the matter is now before the Gawler Council to make its decision. In the event they make the decision that they were suggesting or hinted at, then the Commission would proceed with the inquiry prior to the election, and they've identified the areas that they will focus on. They indicated that the community consultation will not take place until after the election. If they do proceed, then it will be a matter for this council to consider how it will resource the response to the Boundaries Commission. And General Management and myself have been thinking about what's the best way of resourcing this. There's clearly two options. One option is to increase rate revenue, to have more resources to respond to the inquiry, or alternatively look within our program, and that's what we're preferring, to look within our program and to redirect funds to enable a resource to respond. Whichever way you look at it, for the program that we've got, it's a distraction. However, the Boundaries Commission have made it clear that will be required to respond, and that the response will be at our cost. But a report will come back probably in this chamber in April, Mr. Mayor, to outline the options available to the council.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I'd like to say that with a change of government, I'd like to think that there might be a change in the view of the boundary reform legislation. I did mention in the chamber some time back that I'd had this discussion with Peter Malinowskis, Parliament House, and unfortunately they got called away because the bells rang. But I'd raised it in a mayor's meeting, the legislation being flawed and not being really what it was set out to achieve. It was achieving something quite different. And he came up to me after that and he said, I like what you said. And he said, we'd look at that. So I'm just hoping against hope we might have a chance that they'll review that legislation, because it was Mr. Brock's legislation, Jeff, and he's still there. And I think his original intention was never to have council fighting council. It was about looking at logical changes that can be made. For example, if what's that street in Nirayukta? Neil Avenue, for example. Years and years and years, that was in the Barossa Council. But when the highway changed, it came into Light Council. Well, it could be a fair case to put forward, but that should go back into the Barossa. And that's what the legislation, I understand, was all about. The only one that's been successful so far in the time that they've been running and has cost the state a lot of money is one particular matter in Onkaparinga, where there was one little square of development. They drew the line down the centre, and that went to that council area there. So there wasn't this little square that was going to be in that council and the rest of it in that council, and fixed it. But that's the only matter I understand that the Boundaries Commission have resolved. And the cost that's put in councils too, the cost of running this commission and all the other matters is quite frightening. And I think any government would want to be aware of that, or become aware of that. Might want to have a good close look at how it's working. And that hopefully will work in our favour. If that gets abandoned, so right, we're going to start again. I don't think this is correct. Because we're going through, hell and high water in the last 2 or 3 years, and our residents, more importantly, don't know what's going on, and we can't tell them because we don't know. That seems crazy. Councillor David.
Brian, have we got any idea what the budget cost would be for this project?
It will be a guesstimate because we sort of know what the Boundaries Commission will be looking at. They've listed the 5 items or 6 areas that they're going to focus on. How much will come to us to respond to is going to be a bit of a guess. Mm-hmm. So, and then how we resource that, do we use resources to get, external advice, or do we redirect staff internally? It will be probably a response as we require it. And so we're thinking of how do we make a provision from within our existing 3-year program to be able to respond accordingly. And so it's going to be a bit of a guess, Councillor David, to be honest.
Are we sort of talking $500,000 or $1 million? Or?
Oh, no, it won't be in that order. We're thinking, potentially in the order of maybe 100 to 120,000, something like that, because we're actually responding. We're not paying for the investigation. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pretty frightening, all the same. Any further questions, councillors? Not, we move on to the next matter, 10.2, Freeling RSL Anzac Day Dawn Service Road closure. I'll be attending that Anzac Dawn service this year. I did the Kapunda service last year, so it's down to Freeling this year for their. They have an excellent service. They have a march, and they have a gunfire breakfast after, and it's always very well attended and an excellent service. Look forward to that. Any questions, councillors? We'll move on. Kapunda one, street closure for that once again. And again, a very traditional event and extremely well attended. And Councillor Dean will be laying the wreath on behalf of councillors, our Deputy Mayor, on that occasion. Moving on to 10.4, if there's no questions. The Regardless Group minutes. Thank you, Richard, for compiling that. Any questions in relation to that matter? If not, there's a recommendation at the bottom of the page 15 that the reports for information be received and the contents herein. Thank you, Councillor Lynn. Someone like to second that? Councillor Sam. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Now we move on now to our reports for decision. 11.1, the Farm Centre Freeling Recreation Park Management Agreement revisions, and I welcome Gavin Schuster here tonight. Thanks, Gavin, for taking the time to be with us, and you're always welcome in this chamber. Councillors, it's a matter that's been to the forefront of our thinking for a long period of time now, and I think we've got a lot to be proud of as a council in getting behind this centre in the first place and supporting a community that absolutely helped itself. They got off their bums and they raised an extraordinary amount of money. They've done a heap of the work, and most of the construction, my understanding, was either designed and built local resources, and I think that in itself says a lot. It's particularly well managed. We've had the presentations in here from Belgravia, who who actually run the centre itself or manage the centre. And all I think that we've ever missed out on is getting that naming rights, funding agreement and naming rights. But there's a report here, and I'll open it up for any questions or comments, councillor. And there's a series of recommendations there, which we're quite happy to thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Simon?
If we can have comment at least, make a comment.
Certainly.
Yes, through the chair. I mean, I totally agree with you. With your comment, this is a great asset to Light Regional Council and specifically to Freeling. So I mean, it's a great thing. The only thing that I'm a little bit worried about is the fact that we as an elected membership have acted on advice, economic advice, yield modeling, all this sort of stuff to put these things through. And in hindsight, we see that some of these advice was obviously wrong. And I'm just wondering if we can learn from that. I mean, I'm not saying, look, this is a great asset and we need to support it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the thing that is wrong, in my opinion, is the fact that we've been led down a path by information that was incorrect in a sense. And now, because I remember clearly the time where where we've been told that like a naming rights deal is imminent, and therefore we need to sign all these papers now, like urgently, because otherwise the whole thing is in jeopardy. So this council decided on this information that something is imminent and we need to do this, and then a couple of years later nothing has happened. So that's my concern. So that we sometimes, and it's not the first time that this has happened. I mean, we can look at the the retirement village and other stuff that's been modelled and presented to us, and it really hasn't turned out that way. So that's the thing, that if we can learn from them somehow, and I don't know what to do about it, but that's something that bothers me.
Councillor Dean?
Thank you, Mayor Bill. I recall when this first came up and we had to secure the grant, or put in the application for the grant, council had to commit to funding its portion, or the other portion of it, underwrite it basically. And at that stage, I recall there was some discussion about how some of that money might be recouped. One being the naming rights thing, I think might have been mentioned at that time as well. But our understanding was that if they all fell through, we would have to fund it. And I understand that there's still the opportunity for that to happen sometime in the future. So that could happen. In the meantime, what we are committing to in this is 40,000 management agreement, fee, which is quite consistent with what we give other significant groups like Freeling Rec, end of the rest of it, Rec Park, I should say, and the Kabunda Dutton Park. And so I think that's not unreasonable. But my understanding wasn't quite the same as Councillor Simon, in that we were trying to get funding from elsewhere by the arrangement of naming rights. That's still possible, it still can happen. But that decision we made weren't pressured by timelines with regard to that. It was to do with we had to commit to underwriting it if we're going to get the federal money. And there was obviously a deadline on the application we had to meet. Otherwise, the whole thing would have not happened. And I must say that it's been a tremendous success, and I congratulate Gavin and the community people who are involved in it, because it's a very, very successful thing. I think Simon agreed to that as well. So what we have to, the way I read this report is we've got to give some funding now, but it might be less in the future. We haven't given up, in other words.
I think that's the key. We haven't given up. Councillor David?
Just on this discussion, I applaud the Farm Centre for Freeling. It's a brilliant idea, great for all the kids down there. I just wonder, why didn't we get a tax ruling on the deductibility of these naming rights before we factor that into the whole box and dice of the project?
The Mayor, Simon not be able to.
I might pass to Simon.
So.
Thank you. Yeah, through the chair. The report doesn't seek to resolve anything relating to the naming rights. It actually seeks to keep that matter open a bit longer and provide a deadline for the CEO to come back to the council to talk about that a little bit more, because I think, as Councillor Dean put it, we're not giving up on that quite yet. But what it does try to do is acknowledge how long the Freeling Rec Park has been waiting to get that wrapped up, and make sure that their sort of financial sustainability on a day-to-day basis is taken care of sooner rather than later. And so try to separate those two matters, get that stuff sorted for the Freeling Rec Park, so that the CEO can come back by, at the latest, the end of July, with a wrap up on that naming rights front. So that's why you won't see anything in this report about the naming rights stuff, because that's for a future discussion.
Thanks so much, Simon.
Thank you, Simon.
Further questions, councillors? If not, there is a series of recommendations there. These, and councillor in second. The questions, yes, councillor Sam?
Can I just seek clarification on the dates provided in 4B and 4C as 1st of July 2021? Is it 1st of July 2022, 2021? So we're retrospective entering into agreement? Okay, yeah, just so I can get that. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor Sam. Good pickup. Any further questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour? Those against? That's great. Thank you, councillors. And thanks, Gavin, for being here tonight. And you've got to take that good news back to your hard-working group down there. And looking forward to the weekend. Woohoo!
Yeah, there's a Friday and Saturday at the farm fair, and if everybody would like to come along. I was talking to Ross, the bloke, this morning, and he has about 500 sites, doesn't he, that have been booked. Okay. 500 tickets, yes, 130 sites, and he had 2 pull out yesterday, but he said everything's running online, and it looks like it'll be a real goer.
Oh, I think it's fabulous. It really is, and I wouldn't be surprised if we might jag a naming rights sponsor from this particular. Never know. Certainly. Thanks so much, Gavin. And good luck. It's fabulous, and it's great for the community. They'll never look back, sure. Should have been there 20 years ago, but never mind. No, that's another story. Councillors, we'll move on now to, where are we? And thank you so much for that report, Simon. It was excellent. Good body of work. The Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority is Councillor Bill's favourite topic. Yes, you know, we're obviously a part of that authority, and we're part of the decision-making process, etc. although a minor partner in some extent, still a major contributor. Are there any questions, councillors? No questions. I might put the recommendation on the bottom of page 22. There's 2 recommendations there. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Simon. Someone like to second that? And Councillor Peter. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. No. Thanks to Andrew Philpott for his dedication in this. He's been working on that authority for a lot of years, and Councillor Bill also. Now, 11.3 is our 11.3 Sustainability Strategy and Action Plan Committee Consultation Phase. Now, I understand as councillors, this is, they're talking about the consultation phase at this point, not drilling down into the particular aspects of the plan itself. Are there any questions at this point? Councillor Peter.
A comment. I'd like to see number 3 on that recommendation to adequately advertise the public consultation details, because these things just slip under the public notice.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Councillor Peter. Very rarely, do we get a good response from public consultation, and that's part of the reason. That the message is not clear enough to people, and perhaps not widespread enough as well. So you're right on the money. Yeah, Richard would like to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, yeah, very good point and a good addition to the recommendation. URPS, which is our consultant who's managing this, is actually going to be managing the public consultation side of this as well, and getting the message out there to everyone. I think they've very much, they've got the skills in that environment, no pun intended, to do that properly and connect with people probably better than what council would at the moment, just by putting it on its website or Facebook page. So they will do that for us, but I think a worthwhile inclusion to that.
We'll be getting it out onto our website and Facebook pages and all those sorts of things as well.
Yes.
And making the pathway for people to comment easy.
As I understand it. And while we speak, I just, Anna Parnell, who is the consultant who is working with us, has just joined us and will now be listening to this discussion. So I'm not sure if Anna is ready, but it may be appropriate, if it's okay, to ask Anna to provide any commentary or just some words.
Hear that commentary? Yep, certainly. Welcome.
I think it just Anna, Richard Dodson here. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but if you can, the elected body here has is okay if you'd like to add anything to the recommendation or to the report that we've got. She's in. No.
Was there anything that councillors would like to, Councillor Swan?
Yes, if I can make a comment, I think this the process to come to this draft plan has been very thorough and very good. I think there's a lot of people have been involved, and everybody's been given the chance to have their input as they'd like. And I think it's an excellent outcome, and I think Black Regional Council can be proud to put that out for public consultation. I think this is an excellent plan. Just wanted to
Thank you so much, Simon. And I'd also like to acknowledge your contribution too. It's been, quite outstanding. You're very committed to this particular subject. There's no doubt about that, and you're a wealth of knowledge. And I think what you put out there is certainly have people thinking, maybe not always agreeing, and that's fine. But I think what we're endeavouring to do with all of this is to get that consultation back get the opinions of a lot of people, distill all that information, then work out what we can do and when and how. And that's where I think we're up to. We're not trying to solve the world's problems or anything else, but we've got to know what the issues are. And I think you've raised a lot of matters. Councillor Dean, rightly also, has a contrary view on a number of things. I think that's perfect to go out there where people can look at both sides of an argument and come up with what they believe is going to be a good outcome for our region. And also keeping focus on what we can do, because it's all very well to sort of be thinking out here, but if it's impossible, we're just going to put ourselves in a position where we're going to embarrass ourselves by just not doing what we said we would. Councillor Dean? Thank you, Mr. Dean. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Simon. Any further comments, councillors, or discussion? Oh, that. Anne?
G'day, Anna. Richard Dodson here. We've finally got you in. Our elected members have just moved and seconded the recommendation, but if there's anything that you'd like to add to the report or or just any commentary at all, please feel free to do so.
Mainly about the consultation process, Anne, if you could give us some idea of how you're going to run with that.
Simon's probably better to speak about the engagement for the community consultation, but yep, it's great that it's been that you've recommended. Sorry, I just missed the words. Recommended that the report go through.
I think we might need to stick to smoke signals.
Can you hear me?
Very echoey, Anne. Very
Apologies, I had to join through the browser. I can see you all and hear you all very clearly. So can you hear me now? Yep. I was just saying that the process for the community engagement on the draft plan, or how the steps from now, Simon Sheriff is probably better positioned to speak about that, because we'd only briefly discussed. Hello, I can see you waving.
It's not working, Anne. It's just not working.
I'll just put it in there.
Thanks, Anna. Can you hear me through the chair? Yeah, so Anna just referred to me a minute ago. So intent, I think we've already responded to Councillor Kennelly's question that the consultation methods will be broad and on the terms of our constituents. And Anna's team at URPS will play the central role in bringing those comments together, and then also reporting back to us as a group on how those comments have been responded to in a revised strategy and action plan for consideration after that process.
And you'll be managing this project, Simon?
Yeah, so I've been supporting the chair of the Sustainability Working Party in managing the URPS contract.
Right.
And so Anna and I have been working together quite closely on delivering this.
So you know what the feeling of the meeting is? And
Yes. I'm really happy with where it's got to.
Great. Councillor Dean?
I didn't make it clear, but my moving of that recommendation did include Councillor Kennelly's suggestion about consultation.
Yes.
If that's what you wanted, and I presume
that was the third point.
Happy with that as well?
That was the third point in the recommendation, Councillor Kennelly's comment. All right, councillors, I've got a move and a seconder. Any further comment? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, Anne, and the team at RPS.
Thanks.
Great stuff. We move now to, this is almost a operational matter, rescission of the equal employment opportunity policy. It's a policy decision, so it comes to council. There's a recommendation about halfway down page 22, councillors. Any questions in relation to this matter?
Mr. Mayor, could we have some explanation or elaboration on it?
Certainly. June, would you just like to give us a bit of an overview?
Yeah, through the chair. Council has drafted and internally adopted behavioural standards and fair treatment policy, and it has within that policy it incorporates a number of acts. So all the behavioural standards are included in one, and that included the Equal Opportunity Act, Sexuality Act. They're all listed. There's quite a list of acts that were incorporated. Sorry, they were listed. I think that was taken out of my report. That's okay. So that there are a number of acts that were incorporated into the policy. So it became superseded by the behavioural standards and fair treatment policy.
Thanks, June. Any further questions, councillors? It's probably pretty self-explanatory, but there's a recommendation on page 22 if someone would like to move that way. Councillor Peter, someone like to second that? Councillor Mark, further questions or discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thank you, councillors. Well done. Thank you, June. Councillors, we come now to an interesting part of our meeting and say questions on notice. We have none. Questions without notice. Do you have any questions without notice? Councillor Simon, did you know he was going to ask that question? Did you, Councillor Peter? Did you know Councillor Simon was going to? Eh? David, sorry. You. I see. Councillor Simon.
This might be a lengthy one. I got a good list of questions, and I'll start with a few easy ones. But these are pretty much all of these questions are questions that sort of arise through people talking to me in the community. And yeah, so therefore, I'd like to see some answers if I can. So number one, and what water is used to irrigate the landscaping at RT, and who pays for that?
The landscaping at the Roseworthy.
At the Roseworthy Township expansion at St. Eves at this point in time.
Who pays for it? Thank you, Simon.
Sorry, a bit awkward with mics tonight. Through the chair, so the Roseworthy Township expansion, the plan is to have the Roseworthy water scheme water be the source for irrigation. All going well, subject to a future report to council on that scheme and proceeding. That will see mixed sources of water, including recycled stormwater, recycled wastewater, or Gawler River water, all treated appropriately to meet the needs for irrigation. If there's a bit of a lag in getting that water to the site while we get the scheme up and running, there might be some potable water for a while, so drinking water for a while the scheme gets connected. Yeah, so that's all ahead of us. So if there's any irrigation happening at the moment, it would be drinking water.
And who pays for that?
At the moment, it would be the developer until they hand it over to council, at which time, once council takes over the public parks, council pays for the water.
Have another question, Councillor Simon?
Yes. It's a very simple one as well, but still, who pays for the electricity for street lighting that's used at the Roseworthy Township expansion right now?
Who pays for the street lighting currently?
The electricity for the street lighting currently.
Yeah, through the chair, those sort of costs, which would be almost a statutory cost like that, would be borne by council from the start. It's generally only the operational matters that the developer would would wear within that first period of time. So things like the irrigation, as Simon just said, for the establishment of gardens and to make or keep them to a particular standard.
And as a further to this question, then how much is that cost for the electricity right now? Because there's a fair few lights going on in there right now, and they're just shining all night long, or most of it anyway. So is there any costs that we know?
I'd need to do a quick calculation on that. But generally, those lights are around about somewhere between 18 and 22 watts. So they're very efficient street lights. And I'd need to calculate that out to get a number. But it's costs that we've expected to see at this point in time.
Rates are being paid on those blocks, aren't they?
Sorry, that question was rates are being paid on those blocks, and without recalling the exact timing of it. And yes, sorry, the answer is yeah.
Rates after the first financial year.
Yes. So if the blocks were created prior to the 1st of July last year, they would be paying rates, but we would be expecting most of the rates on those blocks to come as of the 1st of July 2022.
Thank you, Richard.
So the next one, there's a little patch of unsealed road on Gartrell Street in Roseworthy, and why, actually what's going on with that? I see that the tiny little movement has happened. I think yesterday there's a sign being put up and they sort of made it a bit flatter again, but this thing's going on for a long time, and I know a lot of disgruntled Roseworthy residents that don't understand what's going on.
Was that Hatch Street, did you say? No.
Gartrell Street.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. Through the chair, it's really just a matter of getting the asphalting contractors out here, which is very difficult at the moment. The matter is a patch of road near Rose Street, yeah, just near Rose Street, yeah. So that's it. It literally is just a matter of us getting the people out here. So we've been struggling with getting the smaller contractors out. The bigger contractors just simply won't come out to do that sort of work. So we are struggling.
That has been, I don't know, over half a year now. So it seems, I just, like I said, these are questions I get from the residents. Yeah. So I just wondered, they're like, how is that possible? Because there's other patches next to it that have been done, and just this one patch has been left. They're always there, so they don't really understand what's going on.
I believe it wasn't just the patch, there was other work being done as well. So there's been some drainage work done there as well.
Anything further, Councillor?
Yes, a fair few bits further. The next question would be, what system was used to repair the intersection at College Road and Kings and Creek and Stone Roads? And what was the cost for that?
I'd have to take that on notice. I'm not aware of what the costs were.
So then if I may further to this question, I brought up the fact that this intersection's melted in the heat, and I sort of brought up the fact that something needs to be done about it that's better than just fixing again. Then we had an excellent suggestion by Councillor Dean saying that we should maybe put a hot mix there instead of just a spray seal. But when I asked this question at the meeting, I was sort of, it was said like, oh, we can't do that and it's too expensive and we won't do that sort of stuff. Now, you know, I don't know, a few months later, I see it's actually done like that, which is an excellent outcome. It's great. I just don't really understand why at the meeting when Councillor Dean suggested that that's like written, like in a letter suggested that's a good way to go, we've sort of been told that's not what we're going to do, and now we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, through the chair, there are two parts to that question. One part to the question is, are you going to lay asphalt at every intersection as part of your asset management plan? And the answer to that question is an unequivocal no. And then the other part to the question is, when you actually have an area that needs to be repaired, what is the most economical way of doing it? And the answer to that is that sometimes asphalt is the better way to do it. So that's the reason for that. But I mean, in terms of, you know, some of the recent roads we've just done Gerald Roberts Road, we've done Nurse Road, we've done Mudlawera Road. All of those roads are straight spray seal roads. All of those roads will have heavy vehicles moving on them in certain at certain locations, not every intersection. And from our point of view, we would probably say we will take the risk and spend, you know, $30,000-$40,000 if there is a failure at an intersection, rather than actually providing asphalt to every single intersection.
Now, there was a question. So how many freedom of information requests has council received in the last 6 months, and about what sort of topic?
Information request.
Freedom of information requests.
Richard, would you be able to give us some update on that, freedom of information requests in the last 6 months?
Speak loudly again. Yeah, yes, we have received that number. Six topics range from soil contamination, dog control matters, other matter which I can't think of. But that's about the size of it, but I can provide an update.
Councillors, I'd just like to point something out, that our meeting procedures allow us to be able to contact staff members prior to a council meeting. So some of these questions, if you've got a question, give the council staff member a call, and maybe that can be resolved, you know, fairly quickly. If it's a bother, a simple phone call solves that, rather than have to go through a whole range of questions on a council meeting night, which, you know, get a half an answer. If you bring up and give someone some notes, they can give you a full answer.
If I can make a comment to that, the point of asking these questions is not really for me to get the answer, because I probably know the answer already. The point of these questions is to ask these questions in public, so that everybody knows these questions being asked and what the official answer to that question is. So if I just ask the relevant manager that, then I know the answer. What good is that to the general public? So this is the point of asking these questions as a question without notice.
I get it. Councillor Dean.
Mayor Bill, if the answers are not voted on as being recorded in the minutes, the only people who hear the answers are the people here.
Yep.
So if I can continue, I got a few more.
You're talking about people on YouTube, for example.
For example, or people that are listening right now on over the internet.
YouTube last month. 7. Councillor Peter.
I would endorse what Councillor Zeller has said, and this is a forum for ideas. We have a spectrum of ratepayers and residents out there.
Certainly.
Now, I think your suggestion that you phone up the particular manager is short-circuiting the whole process.
Depending on the question, I mean, within reason, if it's just a very basic question about some small section of road, there's no reason why it needs to come to a full council meeting to get some resolution on it. A simple phone call fixes it. You know the answer, and the person who may have complained to you, you can go and relate that back to them. That's how it works.
Well, it can be interpreted as a short-circuiting of things, and the uncharitable outside would say that you have a wall of silence. Now, at the cost of the council meeting going on longer, or maybe being tiresome to some participants, that's too bad. That's part of the hurly-burly of council meetings as I see it.
Thank you, councillor Peter. Do you have a question?
Hmm?
Do you have a question?
No, words fail me for the moment.
Councillor David.
Just further to what Simon Zeller just said, Councillor Zeller, does that work two ways, where if one of the managers of council have got something to discuss with an elected member, do they pick up the phone and ring that elected member?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Well, I think it'd be effective communication if they did.
Yeah, I don't get the drift of that, I'm sorry.
I can answer that for myself. Whenever I want to know something, I ring, and if it's going to be a long thing that I have to get an answer to, I'm invited into the office to hear the response. I never ever have a problem. I ring before every meeting if I have a list out of the agenda, and I go to each person if I have to, or I ring them, and they never fail to ring me back. So it does go both ways. That's my opinion, anyhow.
Councillor Sam.
If I may, through the chair, my understanding is that questions on notice, if you'd like an answer on the public record, is probably the most appropriate avenue, because responses are written in writing in the agenda format. So questions on notice, make sure that the response is included in the minute agenda, and probably the most appropriate if you're looking to make sure something is captured on the public record. Question on notice is probably more appropriate for something that's happened in a short time frame, or something that might have arose from within the meeting itself, and which a time frame for providing a question in writing may not have been appropriate. And that way you get a quicker answer instead of having to take answers on notice, which will be provided at the next meeting. You're able to have that meeting on the public record in that same month period. So it might just be making sure that questions are put on notice before the agenda is put out, and that way the answer is in writing, with questions without notice, unless by resolution, as you said, it's not incorporated into the agenda anyway. So on notice might just be a more appropriate avenue.
Thank you, Councillor Sam. Well said. Any further comments, Councillor David?
Have you finished your list? Fine.
I do have another question, at least. So at our meeting of the 8th December 2020, Council carried a recommendation that Section 51 information reports on the Roseworthy Township expansion are presented to subsequent meetings. We have not seen any of those lately, and I just wonder if that means that no further titles have been created.
Didn't quite catch that question, Councillor Song. Yeah, I don't think Brian caught it very well either. Did you catch that?
No, I did. Thank you. Sorry, through the chair, I understand the question was about subsequent reports in terms of allotments that have been created down at Roseworthy Township expansion. And that's something that we have been aware of. We've got a clearance process that has been refined as we're going through from the administrative point of view, and we are mindful of the need to provide the report to the elected members to update on the blocks that have been created. Simon, if memory serves, I'd have to go back and see what's actually been created to this point, but I know that we are starting to find them coming through. So the next report is imminent, as I'm aware, but I'll go back and double check on any particulars. We are mindful of that obligation and the fact there's been a gap.
Thank you, Craig. Further questions, councillors? Councillor David?
I've got two questions. The first one is, 3 times now I've asked for requested that the full business plan for the Drovers Encounter be presented to all the elected members. It was originally promised in the 3rd quarter of 2021. Then it was suggested it would be presented by the end of the year. And the last meeting we got told it was going to be on the agenda for this meeting tonight. Now, I didn't see it on the agenda. Have I missed something?
No, it's not on the agenda tonight. You haven't missed anything.
So further to that point, could I request that my note about this matter be recorded in the meetings minutes. The second question, due to time constraints, and this is why I didn't put a question on notice, I've been contacted by a rather irate ratepayer about a 2-dog attack on their alpacas on their property, and the dealings that they've had with council that I believe we need to fully understand and investigate further to what the appropriate outcome should be in this matter. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor David. You would be aware of the memo that went around to all the elected members in relation to this matter.
Yes, I am.
What details was it missing that you're looking for?
Well, I can understand the frustration with the owners of the animals that have been killed.
Yes.
Those dogs are now have been blooded. Now, I've had experience in years gone by with dogs that have been blooded, and once they've had a kill, they don't stop killing. Now, my big fear is if there's some young kiddie walking down the street one day and these dogs get out again, what could possibly happen to that child? And we are aware of the fact that these dogs now are still within the community. So I think we need a stronger action about the category that we put these particular dogs into. That's my comment.
Craig, would you like to have some response to that? Thanks. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through the chair, thank you, Councillor Mosley, for the question. I'd say first and foremost, dog attack matters obviously very distressing for all parties involved. Certainly the owners of animals who are either injured or deceased, but they can also be for the animal owners who are alleged to be involved in perpetrating the acts as well. In terms of process, if you forgive me, I can't go into the particulars of this particular matter. And the reasons for that are that there are external review options that are available, which while I've covered them off in a separate memo, I'll repeat for now, which include an approach to the Dog and Cat Management Board, the civil proceedings options with respect to the Dog and Cat Management Act. There's the opportunity for a review by the South Australian Civil Affairs Tribunal. I've got that right. Civil Administrative Affairs Tribunal, forgive me, and also through the Ombudsman's Office, Ombudsman SA. I would say, though, that in any, not talking about a specific matter, but in any situation with a dog attack, they're investigated first and foremost by our delegated authorised officers who act as counsel in respect of these matters. They're entrusted with the responsibility to gather the evidence they can. That's by both a site inspection, but also going through gathering photographic evidence, interviewing witnesses, identifying the animals involved, and then also looking at the security of the premises where those animals are kept. And there's a number of facets that are taken into their investigation, which I can't delve into, but in terms of my experience, I defer to the experts in that space, is all I would say there. But on evaluation of all of that evidence, they're entrusted with regard to the responsibility of determining an appropriate course of action. And that can include expiations. It can include appropriately putting a control order as determined as might be reasonable under the Act. But it's very much based on the evidence that they gather and their determination based upon that. So I understand where there might be concern about the determination that might be made in respect of any particular matter. But in that, I have to return back to there are external review options available. And in this particular instance, we have undertaken to do an internal review. We've engaged for an independent review, I should say, of the actions that have been taken, but also with a view to looking at our policy and the application of procedures and seeing if there's recommendations that might be made. And we're doing that within our government structure. That's, yeah, sorry, I think that's covered the matters. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Craig. I think you've given us a very, very clear explanation of a very unfortunate matter. But it's not isolated. This happens, fairly regularly across the state. Dog matters and animals being killed, and it's not funny, and it's very sad for both parties. And also, I think we've just got to be very careful what we say in matters that are or could be before the court. Further questions, councillors? Comments?
Yes, I have a comment.
Certainly.
This occurrence occurred at Freeling. It's a rural area, a farming area, and there are quite a number of livestock there. Numbers of people have sheep, and my own experience has been of seeing unfortunate instances where dogs like this have done a lot of damage. Now, as an interested or concerned observer of this, I think that council has been remiss in terms of enforcement, because it's all very well to say we'll commission reviews and such like. The dogs are still there. What's happening? What happens if tonight or tomorrow they get to and savage other livestock? It's got to be acted on immediately, and I think that the council has been remiss in it. The investigation is quite clear. I've seen the photographs. The photographs were taken by a council officer, and that should logically lead to a rapid enforcement in a case like this. And I hope that that happens.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going through this due process, and that this matter did take place 6 months ago.
Yeah, Bill, this is an operational matter, which there are strict rules and guidelines that have to be followed, and we need to leave it. As a council, we shouldn't be getting involved in the details of this particular incident for that reason.
I understand what you're saying. I think, quite frankly, the question has been answered. And thank you, Craig, for answering it.
Just through the chair, I have discussed this with our dog, Brad, and I understand that what happened was due to a tree falling on a gate that the dogs got out. I don't know if we're allowed to even have alpacas in a residential area. I've asked that question, and that he's going to find out.
Yeah. Just be a bit mindful, because we don't know where this is going to go, this particular matter, and we make comments that are out of order or out of place. We could put ourselves in a bit of strife. But you got a problem with that, Councillor David?
I'd just be highly frustrated that if, and I've said it before, and I'm probably out of order by saying this, I've got thoroughbred horses, and if two dogs like that attack my horses, there wouldn't be any further discussion about the matter. I'd solve it there and then if I saw them, which I'm allowed to do in a rural area if those dogs come onto my premises. Now, I've seen the photos of this alleged where the tree fell on the gate and opened the gate, and I'm amazed that that could be used as a possible reason why the gate is open. I'm amazed. But anyway, I'm not a policeman. I'm not an inspector. We'll leave it up to the experts to sort out.
I think we should leave it at that, councillors. Matter is closed, and if there are no further questions without notice, we'll move on to the next topic, which are motions on notice, which we don't have any, and motions without notice. At this point, we don't have any either. So that brings us to the close of our normal meeting, and we move now into a confidential session for 3 items, councillors. So. Thanks, Craig. And thanks, Richard.
Yeah, no, just kept it cool. It's a tough one, but the questions are.
It was, yeah, no, thanks for that.
And you can go around it.
Oh,
I think, yeah,
that's where it was about to go.
yeah, and I think sometimes you.
Excuse me?
Councillor Simon.
At this very moment, we are not in confidentiality yet.
No.
So I'm not 100% sure why people are leaving, because I will try to not go into confidentiality, and I'd be happy for people to see what's going on.
Okay. First matter, what's the first matter in confidence?
I'm just going to talk to this motion before we go moving. Exactly right. So
the elected body will vote not to go in at all.
no.
We've got three matters to discuss according to the agenda under the confidential meeting, which are the strategic land.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go to recommendations in that ordinary agenda, and we can put that recommendation to start with.
Okay. All right. 16.1 in our agenda, councillors, is the recommendation that under provisions of the Act, we go into confidential. I won't read the whole thing right through because you all can read. But I need someone to move and second that we go into confidence to discuss the first matter, which is the.
Can I make a comment, please? Can I talk to the recommendation before we go and move in second?
Yes. Yeah. So the first matter is strategic land. That's the matter that we are electing to go into confidence for. I'll call for a vote. We go into confidence, councillors? I need someone to move and second.
I want to make a comment first. I want to talk to the recommendation before it gets moved in second, please.
Okay.
But that's my right. So the reason, as it says in this recommendation, the reason to go in confidentiality is as follows. The disclosure of the information would confer a commercial advantage, be contrary to the public interest, reveal a trade secret, or prejudice the commercial position of the person who supplied the information. I've read through this report many times, and I'm not allowed to talk about the report because that's in confidentiality as of right now. But I can guarantee you there's nothing in this report or recommendation that would do any of the above. In fact, it is contrary to the public interest to keep this confidential. So that's all I have to say. So I'll be obviously voting against it. And another thing, if this recommendation to consider this report is in confidence gets up, I want the presiding member to read out the entire recommendation word from word, loud and clear, so that the public knows what their elected members are up to. And I will be calling for a division.
And you're talking about this particular recommendation on the strategic
yes,
land?
Yes, the recommendation on the strategic land, which the recommendation is that we go into confidentiality.
You're putting a motion that we don't go into confidence to discuss this matter.
Yeah, that we don't move into confidence to discuss this matter, exactly.
Okay, you're quite welcome to do that, and that's a reasonable commentary and a reasonable reason for us not to go into confidence, or there's reasons on the other side that we should. So there's a motion on the table that we don't go into confidence regarding this matter.
Before we do that, Mayor Bill, I'd like to hear from the staff members who did the recommendation that go into confidence. I'd like to have a bit of information before I decide to vote on this. I've heard one side of the story from Councillor Simon. I just want to, because it's been put in here as under confidence, there must be a reason why. The reasons are listed. I just want someone to clarify why that's the case and whether in fact Simon is correct or not.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dean. Thank you, Councillor Simon, through the chair. As elected members will be aware, this report forms part of a suite of, or will form part of a suite of reports and recommendations that have been provided to elected members over the last 12 months. And our view is that very similar to the retirement village at Kapunda, matters that involve us, marketing land or disposing of land would be dealt with in confidence. And while we recognise that there may be components of a report that could be released, we believe in its totality, it is best dealt with in confidence. In terms of this particular matter, it will be very clear that if we go into confidence and those recommendations were accepted, that there would be a public component to the next stage that we go through with one of those recommendations that is in there, because it does refer to or have regard to the community land and a community revocation process. But that side of things would be completely done within a public environment. But we believe right at this point in time, it is still appropriate for us to discuss these matters in confidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Pitt.
I think we might have proceeded with alacrity in going on with the agenda here. And my query is, we have the minutes of the last confidential section of our February council meeting. Now, they haven't been mentioned. There hasn't been any proposal for their acceptance.
They're adopted. You're quite correct. And I don't know where they are in my agenda papers either. Kari, the minutes from the previous confidential meeting. Richard, could you give us a hand here?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again, Councillor Kelly, for raising that issue. My recommendation would be that we're actually talking about 3 new items instead of confidential proposals. Minutes, I think, noted earlier in the meeting about potential practice issue. I would think that we could quite okay for us to discuss those following items. So and why I say that is that this is a matter that's been raised that wasn't in the agenda, but has been council notice during this meeting. So my view would be back on the end of the agenda, not to say that we get what council raised, quite pertinent. So add it on to the end of
The minutes of the confidential meeting were adopted, though, early in the meeting, at the start of the meeting.
No,
under section 3 of the meeting. They were adopted.
I don't think so.
The resolution, I believe, adopting was to adopt the council minutes, not the confidential minutes.
Not what it says there.
So the minute will show that the confidential will be moved. Resolution passed earlier. So my understanding, recommendation of council process at the start of the meeting, they were prepared to adopt the council minutes. They weren't prepared at the time to adopt potential council, because there was this discussion around whether there's a mover and a seconder, and the numbers outline the division process. That was my issue. What I'm saying,
Oh, yeah.
that's a new item into this agenda.
Yeah.
Add that on to the end of the discussion of the potential item. 3, there will be 4, and have that.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct,
So,
because the minutes of the previous meeting and the confidential minutes of the ordinary meeting held on Tuesday, blah, 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 was fine. But we withdrew through Councillor Canelli's motion, we withdrew the adopting confidential minutes to.
So-
You're quite correct.
so just to confirm what the process will be, as I understand it, Richard, is that we will need a motion at some point to go into confidence to correct those minutes and acknowledge that, and then we will come out of confidence into our regular council meeting to actually adopt those confidential minutes.
Yes.
Well, let's do it in order, and that we'll deal with this particular matter first. Councillor Peter.
Yes, I hear what was said, and the business of the calling of a division is one element of the minutes covered by the confidential minutes of the last
That's correct.
council meeting.
Yes.
Now, that being the case, shouldn't we be, now if we decide that we will deal with the mover of the division business at the end of this session, what about the rest of the minutes from last month? Shouldn't we put them up now, get a mover and a seconder, and vote on them?
You were asking for the minutes to be corrected, and the correction
No,
was
that's
that,
one thing.
yeah,
It's one item.
and you're suggesting there are more.
Well, read the minutes of the last confidential.
Yeah.
I'll retract part of what I said. Just reminded myself of what was came in the last confidential session meeting minutes. So 2 of the items discussed at the last confidential meeting of the council concern two of the items that are actually proposed to be discussed in the current agenda. So with that in mind, I think Councillor Pinelli is quite right. We should have a motion without notice raised now to consider that the issue of the confidential minutes now, because there is a direct impact on the discussion items that follow. So I agree with Councillor Pinelli, having reviewed those minutes just now, ought to motion without notice. Consider of February confidential minutes.
Fine. All right, we accept that. I'll need a motion without notice.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just realised one of those items may have been associated with my conflict of interest, so I'll leave the chamber.
If we need an elected member to motion, then we move into confidence to deal with the confidential matter.
That's the first thing we do. Councillors, can I have your attention for a moment, please? We will need to move into confidence to talk about the previous minutes in the confidential meeting of council. So I'll accept a motion without notice if someone would like to move that way, that we move into confidence. Councillor David. And councillor, someone like to second that? Councillor Simon. All those in favour? We're moving to confidence now, councillors. Why does it need to be up and running? This is a council meeting. It's not a TV show.
That is up to you to decide.
Well, that's right, it is.
However, yes, I would like to move the motion that we do that in the interest of the public, we should not go into confidence at point 16.1 strategic land.
Do we have a seconder? Do we have any further comment, councillor?
I'd like to talk to this as well, as I second it. My understanding of reading what's required for this to be in confidence, there's no mention of any dollar figures. There's no mention of any companies negotiating, right? And there's no mention of any agreements with third parties, companies that are making bids for different parts of land. So I don't see why we need to stay in confidence with this when we're talking about selling off an asset that belongs to the ratepayers.
Thank you, councillor David. Any further comments? Councillor Sam?
Through the chair, I'm of the contrary belief that this falls under BI, that it could be expected that there's a commercial advantage. I'd be more than happy to debate the finer points in a confidential session. However, at this point, I think there's a precedence that, and as Richard has said before, parts of this recommendation, if adopted, would come into the public. And I think it'd be appropriate in part for this if the recommendation in the confidential session was adopted, parts of the recommendation to come into the public forum. However, I believe the discussion falls under BI, and the totality should be discussed in a confidential session, and based on that, disagree with that motion.
So in other words, you'd be looking to see this matter come back to council in two parts?
No. Well, I think we've got a mover and a seconder.
Okay. Anything further, councillors? Any further comments, questions?
Yeah, so I support Sam. There is dollar figures are mentioned, and my query is, what does that do to the previous confidential discussion of this matter in the past? Because we'll be discussing confidential matters in the public figure if it's not in confidence now. But it just gets a whole can of worms. And I don't think it's going to come out, into community areas very soon if it goes ahead. So.
Thank you, councillor Bill.
Move that the motion be put.
Well, councillors, we have a move that the motion be put, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion's lost. We will. Yes, and we'll record that. No, if you're for the motion, you have to stand behind your seats. No, if you're for the motion. Yeah. Oh, of course you were, yeah. Great. Thank you. Okay, we'll move into this item 16. Oh, now I've got to put the motion that we do go into confidence. That's right. Now we voted we're not going to. Would someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor Sam. Someone second that. Councillor Sharon. All those in favour? Those against? No, that's carried.
Can I make a comment first, please?
Certainly.
I request that the entire recommendation be read out in full.
You're moving that motion, that the recommendation.
That is not a motion. That is what's meant to.
Confidence gets read out in full.
They always do. That's what is meant to happen.
Do we have someone second that? There's no signet lapses, so we'll move on. We're in confidential session, I think. Do we get a seconder?
Yes.
Goodness me. Councillor Sharon. Councillor Sharon.
Yeah.
We're in confidential session. All those in favour? we've done that. We're in a confidential session, councillors.
no.
To discuss
Again,
16.1, the strategic land. Councillor Simon. That this matter be kept confidential until the matter is finalised. It's pretty standard. Excluding item 4 in the recommendation relating to the community land revocation process. Okay, so
we put someone to move that. Councillor Sam.
Councillor Sam and Councillor Sharon. Yeah, I thought they already did. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors.
Fantastic.
Now, do I need someone to move? We go back into our normal meeting. We do. Councillor Sam and Councillor. We're going to go back into our normal meeting to go back into confidential.
We're in our normal.
Oh, we go back into confidence. Pardon me, Councillor Sam and Councillor Sharon. We're back in the confidential session, councillors, to talk on. All those in favour. Let's go. We're back in confidence to review the confidential register. Is this to the matters finalised again? Okay. The same recommendation as previous, councillors. It's a bit boring, isn't it? That this matter be kept confidential until a matter is finalised, and it will be with one additional amendment to it, which was what Kyron brings back.
No amendment.
No amendment?
It'll be
Okay.
dealt with in the next quarter.
Okay. Right. Okay, someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor Simon. Someone like to second that? Councillor Mark, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Now, I need someone to move that we go back into confidential session. Oh. June? Yeah. Yeah, thanks, June. Thanks for considering us workers. Yeah. Councillors, I need someone to move that we go into confidential session. Councillor Sam, Councillor Lynn, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried.
I'll get that one.